Hello everyone and welcome to the remake of a video I made like a year ago. As I've already mentioned in game number 2 of this match, 1971 candidates match between Bobby Fischer and Mark Taimanov, I already made a video on game 3. It was about 1 year ago, but a lot of things have changed. I have a lot more vast knowledge now to use in my videos, while I was making that video a year ago, I didn't think I'd make all of the videos. I thought I'd only make one game from the match, and then I pretty much stuffed everything about the match and the game in that one video. So, as a lot of you have requested an additional video on this game, I decided to make a remake. It will not be in 4K or 8K or something. It will still be in 180p, but the human eye can't perceive the 4K anyway. So that's just that would just be stealing your money. So, like we've said, 1971 candidates match, Mark Taimanov against Bobby Fischer. Taimanov again has the white pieces, and as we've mentioned in game number 2, the game number 2 is still being played. So while game number 3 is started, game 2 still didn't finish because game number 2 was adjourned twice. So this game will finish before they continue their adjourned game 2. And this will have a lot to do with the match, but we're going to talk about that some more during this game. As we don't have a lot of photos, we do have one photo. We already showed it during game 1, but there it is, just to set the mood. Now, all of that being said, let's check out the game. In game number 3, Taimanov opens with the same line he opened in game 1. So, d4, knight to f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop to g7. Fischer goes for the king's Indian defense. e4, d6, knight to f3, so all the same. We have castles, bishop to e2, e5. We have castles, knight to c6 and d5. Again, Taimanov goes for the exact same variation. Knight e7 by Fischer, bishop to d2. We have knight to e8, rook to c1, and f5. So this is the exact same position as they already played in game 1. And if you remember game 1, if you don't, I will put a link to it in the description below. You should definitely check it out before watching game 3. Here, Taimanov in game 1 played captures on f5. After Fischer captures, he went knight to g5. And you remember the plan. Knight will come to e6. Here, Fischer will be forced to capture it, and then Fischer will win this e6 pawn eventually. But by then, Taimanov will already create a very nice kingside attack. And this is definitely the correct way to go for Taimanov in this match. He doesn't want to go into long endgames with Fischer. He just wants to create some nice, beautiful positions and then start attacking Fischer. So after f5, he decided to improve this variation a bit. First, he played queen to b3. A nice idea, as it lines up the queen with the king that is on g8. Also, it prevents this light square bishop from being developed. And Taimanov is ready to push c5 here at one point, so Fischer plays b6. Perhaps he will develop the bishop to b7. Also, b6 is preventing c5, but this does weaken the light squares on the queen side, as Tal mentions. So here we have e captures on f5, g captures on f5, and yet again knight to g5. So just an in-between move, this queen b3 and b6, but everything else will now be the same as in game 1, but very different, as you'll see. Here, there's a choice for Fischer. Does he want to go h6 and go into this forced line of knight e6, pawn captures, bishop captures, pawn captures, and now queen to c8, guarding this pawn, and be ready to face c5, where the queen will already be guarding, but it doesn't matter, as Taimanov will still be able to push c5 here. After b captures, knight here, and now white has a very nice position, definitely has compensation for the pawn. Of course, queen captures will be impossible now. This is indirectly defending it. Knight captures here, and black will lose the queen. You cannot capture. The queen is pinned after king defends, bishop c4, and black is lost. So okay, after knight g5, Fischer doesn't go for this forced line. Well, it's not forced all the way to losing your queen, but up until knight d5. So instead, he goes knight to f6, and here f4. Again, a very nice move. Fischer has to decide whether he wants to go e4, where something like bishop e3, d4 will be possible, and it will be somewhat hard for Fischer to develop his pieces, especially the light square bishop. So instead of closing the center, Fischer decides to go for this very nice idea, that is h6, but only now. a very forcing line. We have f captures on e5, d captures on e5, and now c5. Here Taimanov creates a very nice position where d6 is definitely a threat in all of the variations. For example, if you play something like h captures on g5, grab the knight on g5, d6 is coming with check. King h8, d captures on e7, queen captures, and now c captures on b6. A captures, and now bishop captures on g5, and the white will have a beautiful position. Okay, perhaps the engine maybe would say that this is about equal, but with Fischer's naked king in the corner, white's position would be much easier to play here. So after c5, another idea is king to h8, simply getting the king out of the pin, but still d6 is a very nice threat. And again, what do you do here? You can either capture, and then we have pretty much the same deal, or capture here and then d captures on e7, and again, we pretty much the same thing. So after queen captures, of course, but maybe capturing on here is better than going king h8 first. But okay, Fischer doesn't go for any of this. Instead, he goes knight f captures on d5. Of course, this is not free by any means. Knight captures on d5 is played by Taimanov, knight captures on d5, and here comes c captures on b6. A very nice idea, as of course Fischer's threat is, Taimanov's threat is bishop to c4, pinning this knight, and there's no good way to actually prevent this. You can't push c6, then the rook is coming. You can't block with the bishop because the knight is guarding the e6 square. If you play bishop b7, then knight does come to e6, attacks your rook and queen. So a very unpleasant position for Fischer. Here Fischer played a captures on b6, and here now it's Taimanov's move. He really has to make a choice here. Does he want to go for the forcing line rook captures on c7? The knight cannot capture as it's pinned. You can see this very nice diagonal. If the queen captures, then it's game over. First queen captures on d5 with check, and then queen picks up the rook on a8. So after h captures on g5, you would get bishop captures on g5, and again, the queen cannot capture on g5 because of the same variation, or on c7 for that matter. But here Fischer would have queen to d6, and here it seems that he's defending properly. Now bishop to c4 isn't much of a threat, bishop to e6 will simply defend, and now this rook on c7 does look a bit fishy here. So okay, after a captures on b6, Taimanov goes for a more direct approach. He plays rook to c6, keeps everything on the board, but really limits Fischer's options. So what do you do here? There are a couple of options here. For example, if you capture on g5 now, then you're not gonna have too much fun. Now bishop to c4 will win the game on the spot. There's no way to prevent any of this. Now the rook is guarding the e6 square. For example, you can move the king h8, but then you get bishop captures here, and after you have to prevent queen to h3, then this would result in checkmate. After bishop blocks and queen captures, you have to play f4, so the bishop would be guarding the h3 square, but now bishop to b4, and white's attack will be unstoppable. So yeah, after this rook to c6, also if you play something like bishop to f6, maybe not grab it immediately, but try to prepare grabbing, then the same idea, bishop to c4 will win you the game. So here, after some consideration, comes a move that really irritated Taimanov. It's a move that is of course a favorite move by the engine, so feel free to pause the video here and try to find a nice defensive move for black. Just put yourself in Fischer's shoes here. You're really being attacked here. Try and defend this position. I'll give it a couple of seconds for you to decide. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are an excellent defender, with engine precision. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, here Fischer played king to h8. And here we have the famous position that will be discussed for probably the next century. Well, now not anymore, now that we have engines, but in those days for a very long time. Here, as I've mentioned in the previous video I made a year ago, here Taimanov went into a deep think. Tal mentions in his article for over an hour, but I believe it's closer to 72 minutes. So that's a lot of thinking for one move, and as Tal mentions, often when you go like into a really deep think, you will not find a better move than the one you already thought of. Like, it's very rare that you will calculate for an hour and then find a move you haven't found like in the first half an hour or the first 15 minutes. I've never heard of such a case. I've thought about positions for 40 minutes, 50 minutes in classical tournaments, but never really got me anything. So yeah, this is the famous position, and here after 72 minutes have passed, Taimanov retreated with the knight to f3, as he couldn't find anything better. But here we have a couple of ideas that are indeed very nice. Queen to h3 is one such move that simply prevents Fischer from capturing the knight on g5, but also threatens rook captures on h6. Of course, this will result in checkmate. And this queen to h3 move is a move that will haunt Mark Taimanov for the rest of his life. Because at least, I mean, even with perfect play, which is hard to imagine. It's not hard to imagine Fischer is capable of such play, but it would be extremely hard to defend this position. Such moves would be something like knight to f6 to prevent the rook from capturing here. But even here, white would have an excellent game. After bishop to c3, the bishop was attacked, so you have to move it. Now bishop to b7, and here rook to e6. Knight to g4, offering a knight to grab the knight on g5. But okay, bishop captures, queen captures, here comes bishop captures on f5, and white would have a very strong attack here. Another idea, after this queen to h3 move, is rook to f6. Rook to f6 seems to be a bit better, but here comes bishop to c4. And now you see the problem. You cannot capture the rook on c6 because knight to f7 will capture the queen as it comes with a fork. And there aren't all that many moves you can play here. You still cannot capture, so what can you do here? f4, of course, is an idea, opening up a discovered attack from the bishop to the queen. Queen to f3 comes, and now comes h captures on g5. Rook captures, bishop captures, and now bishop captures on d5, attacking the rook on a8. Bishop to g4. You want this in-between move. For example, if white captures, then black can capture the bishop here, but white would simply move, and now you have to move the rook. And here comes bishop to c3, and Fischer would be up a pawn here, but with his bare-naked king and the bishop pair slicing in this direction, queen can come to g6. It would be so much easier to play this with white, and of course, it's always easier to attack than to defend. So this is the critical moment after this king to h8 move by Fischer, a really stubborn, resilient move, which Taimanov really hated. He mentioned this, that he felt like he was doing everything right. He was playing creative, beautiful chess, but Fischer seemed like he was invulnerable. So yeah, after this h6 move, Taimanov simply retreated, knight to f3, and now Fischer took this opportunity to develop pieces and grab the initiative. Bishop to b7. Now the rook has to move. We have rook to g6 and now knight to f4, forcing a trade here. As the rook and the bishop on e2 are unguarded, you have to capture the knight. Bishop captures on f4 was played, e captures on f4, and now comes rook to d1. Queen to e7, we have rook to e6, queen comes to c5 with check, king to f1, king to h1 is also possible, but there are too many back rank weaknesses and the king will be safer on f1. Rook 8 to d8, Fischer wants to exchange one pair of rooks, so Taimanov's back rank weaknesses will really be felt. We have rook captures on d8, rook captures on d8, and now queen to a4. Here preparing rook to e8. We have queen to c1 check, king to f2, and now comes a beautiful move by Fischer, bishop to f8, preparing to hone this bishop in on the c5 square and deliver this check. This would be deadly, so Taimanov has to prevent it. b4 is played, and now comes bishop to e4. Again, a beautiful move, blocking this rook's defense of the e3 square, and here queen to e3 will be a very nice trap. Also, there are some hidden traps here, but to understand them, we have to see what are white's options here. For example, if queen to b3 is played to prevent any queen e3 ideas, then you have this b5 move. Here Fischer will simply say, okay, I'm up a pawn, your attack is has been prevented. I mean, I'm just winning here, I guess. Of course, you cannot capture it. If you capture, then rook d1 will be deadly. And whatever you do here, it's very interesting. For example, bishop to e2, there is a beautiful variation here that wins the game instantly for black. It's a checkmate in 4. So as an exercise, as a puzzle, feel free to check it out just to see how rich the position was. So I will give it a couple of seconds as usual. For those of you who found queen to c5 check, you are extremely cool, and this is the way to go. Bishop to c5 check also works, but you know, queen to c5 is way cooler, so you should play that. B captures on c5, bishop captures on c5 with check, and now it's all over. The king has nowhere to go. As you can see here, you either have to block with the queen, and then bishop captures e3 is checkmate, or first you can give up a knight, but then after bishop captures, the f3 square is still covered by the light square bishop. Still queen has to block, and still bishop captures on e3 will be checkmate. So that's the thing with queen to b3. So how about queen to b5, preventing this pawn from reaching b5 and, you know, still keeping an eye on everything? Well, here's the problem of queen e3 check. Now you're not guarding e3. After king moves, queen to c1 check, king moves, and now comes this bishop to d5 move. Simple, but it works. You have to move the rook. e5 square is the only square where the rook will not be attacked. Now comes the bishop captures on a2, and now Fischer simply grabbed another pawn, and white's attack is nowhere to be found. If rook e8, then rook captures, queen captures, and simply queen e3 check, forcing a trade of queens. Captures, 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 and now bishop captures on b4 with 2 extra pawns and the bishop pair. This would be easily winning for Fischer. So, after this bishop to e4 move by Fischer, queen b3 doesn't work, queen b5 doesn't work, a lot of things don't work, so Taimanov decided to go for a nice queen sacrifice. He played rook to e8, and it seems like a really weird move. Why do you allow bishop to c6 with an attack on your queen and on the rook? But this is all part of Taimanov's plan, as he didn't like queen b3 or queen b5 moves, so he decided to sacrifice his queen here. Queen captures on c6 was played. We have queen captures on c6, and now rook captures on d8. So grabbing some material for the queen, but you will not be able to capture the bishop. Queen to f6 is played, attacking the rook. Rook c8, and now queen to e7. We have king f1, king h7, and now knight to d4. Bishop to g7, and now knight to b5. Knight captures on f5 is also very interesting, but it doesn't work. Now you have queen to d7 attacking both the rook and the knight. It would be very unfortunate if you played queen to e6 here with the same idea, because now you would lose the game due to bishop to d3. And now the king has nowhere to go. You are threatening all sorts of nice discoveries, and even if you capture the rook, you're still going to lose the queen due to this check. King moves, now you're up a piece and winning the game. So this would be very unfortunate for Fischer, but you know, of course, he will not allow this, and Taimanov saw that it doesn't work, so he didn't capture it. Knight b5, we have bishop to e5, and now a3. Queen d7, this is completely lost for white, but, you know, you have to try. Rook to a8, we have f3, now simply making room for the dark square bishop. G captures, and now bishop captures on h2. King attacks bishop, and now Fischer finishes the game with great style. Queen to g7 check. Of course, if you move the king, for example, king f2, queen g1 will be checkmate, so you have to capture it, but then you allow queen e5 check. And it was in this position on move 41 that the game was adjourned, but it was never continued, of course, because after the king moves, you can capture the bishop, and then it's all over. A knight and rook are no match for the queen. So yeah, that's pretty much it, and it's a very interesting to get back here in this. This is definitely the critical moment, perhaps one of the most critical moments ever. Missing this queen to h3 move, Tal says that it's this move that cost Taimanov at least a point and a half, because here it cost him a full point, because if he played it, Tal is sure that he would win this game against Fischer. And then, of course, as you already heard in my video on game number 2 of this match, Taimanov was probably so frustrated, but also he didn't have that much time to prepare for continuing game 2, because he had to prepare for game 3, and also Tal does blame Taimanov's seconds for not preparing some very nice drawish lines for continuing game number 2. So that's all very interesting, but now, as you all know, as you've already seen my video on game 2, Fischer is now 3 points in the lead, and now it's a 10 game match, so anything can happen here, but being down 2 points, and Fischer did win already 2 games with the black pieces. So as a bonus for this video, aside from this queen to h3 move, I will also show a very nice engine line that I just found by accident, and I thought it was really beautiful, so I decided to share that with you guys as well. Besides this queen to h3 move, there is also the very interesting bishop to f3 move. And now, after blocking the bishop, bishop captures. We have pawn captures, and now knight to f7 check. Rook captures, and now e3, blocking the bishop on d2. Now comes bishop to e1, and after queen to g5, here comes queen to c2. The threat is rook to g6, but black doesn't care. Rook captures on a2. We have rook to g6, and now comes rook to a1. Temporary queen sacrifice on g5. Rook captures, now comes rook captures on e1 with check. You have to block with the rook, rook to f1, now comes rook captures, king captures, and now bishop to a6 check. King to e1, and now h captures on g5, and now you have 2 bishops and a knight with a protected passed pawn on e3. It's an excellent position for black, but you're probably not going to lose with white because of how open the black king is, but only black can win this position. So also one of the moves that didn't quite work for white, but I thought it was a very nice variation, so I decided to share it as well. So yeah, but I will not show you the finishing position, rather this one and this queen to h3 move that I will use as a thumbnail, as it is, such a shame that it didn't happen. In game 1 and game 3 with the white pieces, Taimanov played beautiful chess, and it just wasn't his it wasn't his match. Fischer played, stubborn moves, king h8, engine's favorite. There's no good, other than queen to h3, there's no good move to counter it. But only one person can win the match, and in this case, so far Bobby won all 3 games. So yeah, enough of my rambling. I do hope you enjoyed the game and that you're enjoying the series so far. I would like to thank Jeremy Komitas, Martin Johnston, Don Dugan, Auction Options, Donald Anderson, and Booty Weedo for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check all my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with either game number 4 or a couple of games from the St. Louis Rapid event. And also a quick announcement, my video on Rashid Nejmedinov versus Oleg Chernikov, the greatest queen sacrifice in chess history, just passed 2 million views today. So if you haven't seen it, I will also put a link to that in the description below if you want to check it out. So yeah, very happy that the first video I made that past 2 million views is a game by none other than Rashid Nejmedinov. So yeah, thank you all, and I'll see you soon.